Hello, this is Chris Goldthorpe, and we're going to jump into the time machine and go back to 1937. And why? Because we're looking at the second time that Alekhine became world champion. I think his name is actually pronounced Alochim. I think you might have to be Russian to know how to pronounce his name properly. We Americans have been saying Alekhine for a long time, but if I said it any other way, you might not know who I was talking about. So let's, real briefly, I promise, not so long, let's take a look at 1937. Charlie Chaplin here. Okay, we don't need to hear the whole thing. There's some 1937 entertainment. There's a 1937 car. This is 1937 Plymouth truck. And apparently it's been upgraded since then. I don't think they had wheels like that in 1937. What was happening in 1937? Well, on Wikipedia here, we have mathematics, medicine, physics. Frank White ground tests the first jet engine. That's probably the most notable thing here. Einstein and Rosen publish a paper denying the gravitational waves can exist. They said it's not a wave. And in math, not too much that a non-mathematician will really relate to here. And see what was going on around the world in 1937. Well, my mom turned 1 year old sometime about in then, but basically war broke out between Japan and China. The Japanese were occupying Beijing and they seized Nanjing. In Britain, the government takes measures to suppress fascism, and a guy named Hitler, he offered to stop intervening in Spain if other countries also would, but the USSR continues aid for the Republican rebels. The German Air Force bombs Guernica, causing devastation and thousands of civilian casualties. And India gains a constitution, and Burma is separated. Britain announces a plan to partition Palestine. And the German airship, the Hindenburg, it exploded over New Jersey and 36 people died. Some survived by jumping off of it. And Amelia Earhart tried to do her around the world attempt, but she somehow vanished over the Pacific. So this is the historical context of this game. Alekhine was the only world champion to die as a world champion. So here's Alekhine. And we've talked about him in previous videos. And this is the second time he's playing the same player. So information about Alekhine and Dr. Max Euwe is in the previous video, where Dr. Max Euwe won against Alekhine. This time it went the other way, and Alekhine regained his championship in 1937. So let's see how he did that. And we'll go to the game. And it started with d4. Alexander Alekhine, although known as an attacking player, he often started with a closed opening. He didn't necessarily come out swinging blindly. He built up his position first. And this was a flexible way of meeting d4, controlling e4. And c4, even then, was rather flexible. e6 came along. These days we probably see a little bit more King's Indian and Grunfeld, but among the top players, this setup is still very popular. Alpha Zero apparently took a hacksaw to the Queen's Indian, although I'm still not convinced that masters can't play it against humans. The Queen's Indian is where this pawn goes to b6. Black doesn't want to do that if white moves this knight first, because then white still has the option of moving his f-pawn to f3 and then going to e4 with the bishop biting on granite. But if white moves the king's knight out now, then black has green light to go ahead and play Queen's Indian. So he does it this way, and so black plays what is still very successful today, the Nimzo Indian. As the name would suggest, it's named in part because of Aaron Nimzowitsch, who didn't really invent it, but he analyzed it a lot. And the Rogozin and some other similar openings are somewhat based on this idea of restraint. He's willing to create a closed and blocked position because if he trades the bishop for the knight, the knights will actually be more valuable than bishops. And so black just wants to keep white from doing everything he wants to do. So the Nimzo Indian, Aaron Nimzowitsch, along with Richard Reddy and Alekhine, were the disciples of the so-called hypermodern school, which advocated piece control of the center before pawn occupation of the center. It did not abdicate pawn occupation of the center, merely delaying it until a player had more control of it. So they did a lot of these fianchettos, where a pawn in the knight file moves up one, and then the bishop comes to take the long diagonal. White might do that, playing g3 and bishop to g2. e3. This is the so-called Rubinstein variation, named after Akiba Rubinstein, who, by the time this game was played, he was probably a little bit off the peak. There's an excellent video here on YouTube where it has famous players' peak ratings through history, and it goes all the way back to about the 1600s, and there's a continuous simultaneous graph of all of these different players' estimated playing strength, and it's kind of interesting to see. So black now castles, which is still considered to be a good move. Knight ge2 might have been a little bit off. Now it's real easy for me sitting here in the year 2020 to criticize a move that happened over 80 years ago, long before anybody had any computerized analysis equipment, and certainly before such equipment could be considered to be more reliable than human experts. This computer is looking at hundreds of thousands of variations per second. So if I'd been standing there in 1937, I really don't think that I would be confidently calling this move a mistake, especially not with Dr. Max Erver, the sitting world champion, playing it. Okay, so black's going to go ahead and strike out here at the center. Since this knight guards this knight, black's not going to be doubling any pawns here anyway, so he doesn't really have to worry about white's trading off a doubled pawn. So, and now white wants him to go ahead and make the trade if he's going to. Possibly wisely, black retains the bishop pair, and now white opens the c-file, but at the expense of getting rid of one of his own pawns that controls the center square. And now knight to g3. Knight to f4 might have been stronger, but again, just because an engine here 80 years later after the game was played tells me, oh, knight f4 is better, it certainly doesn't mean that any human can be expected to notice intuitively and see, oh yeah, that move's better. c5. Black must fight with white center. He's keeping up in development. He's got 2 pieces out and he's castled. And here's another trade. And although it results in the d-pawn being an isolated queen's pawn for black, it is, though, the only pawn in the center. And for the time being, at least, black does have it adequately controlled. White cannot pin the knight. So black may get the opportunity and the inclination to push this forward and just trade it if he finds it difficult to defend. b4. By the way, central control is almost only useful to the extent that there are minor pieces on the board. And black counterattacks very actively. And somewhere along the way here, we get to a position that's like it's dead equal, which normally when an engine says it's equal, normally that means black has done very well, especially when it's so early in the game with so many pieces on the board. Okay, white gets the queen onto this diagonal with h7. He might put a bishop here soon. He blockades this guy and attacks the pawn all in one. And according to various engines here, this position is close enough to equal. And now queen a5, attacking this pawn, and if this pawn moves at all before he castles or moves the king, of course there's another check involved. So white had better not play a move like this. Not that he's going to. These are both very strong players, world championship caliber. White puts his rook on the file. This is a normal intuitive move that most of us would have made. The rook and the bishop both see this square. And black gets another piece out. And now he comes up here making it his project apparently to get rid of this pawn, even though this hasn't moved yet and he hasn't castled yet. And he even allows this. However, the black queen is not guarded. So do you see what white can do before you look back at the move list or the analysis engine? Yeah, of course he captures here, and that threatens the black queen. If the black queen just moves away, then white can just move his rook away. And if queen takes queen, then of course white can take the black queen and save his rook all in one move by just taking back. Okay, so the queen did go away, and now he gets another piece out. Alekhine seems to have a knack for not doing what's simple. Always got a move that somebody never thought of. And honestly, I don't really see why it's so bad for black to take the rook. And he goes here. So wouldn't we like to know what's wrong with taking the rook? I mean, why would that be such a bad thing? Actually, the engines say that he should go ahead and try. Takes. Now, he sacrificed a bishop for a rook. So that's, you know, almost 2 pawns difference. And these are both lined up here, but it's not right away obvious that white has enough compensation for that. Black's got 2 rooks. He's got a pair of bishops against the knight. So it's a smaller difference than it may seem. But that's the kind of a decision that white would have to make with some sort of knowledge in addition to merely calculating moves. The 2 knights are both guarding each other. Now all the rooks are free to go where they like. c6. It's an odd looking move. You might wonder, why is he just giving away a pawn? What does he get for that? It's not like he's going to trap this rook here on f8 by putting this bishop on a3. He's threatening to move this knight, but what's wrong with just simply taking with the pawn? Let's see what happens if black just takes with a pawn. It's still showing that it's very, very strong for black. More than 3/4 of a pawn and almost 4/5 of a pawn in black's favor. See, that's a minus there. So the short answer is, yeah, maybe he should have done that, but he didn't. I don't think Max Euwe is afraid of Alekhine, but he didn't pull the trigger there. Instead, after this move, or Alekhine didn't take Max Euwe's rook. Alekhine is the one who's the black pieces in this game. So takes that. Now the rook can move, and he still leaves it there. Absolutely amazing. So black finally decides to take it. And black goes here. Now, if you look at this, how many of us would really have made a different move for black? Yet these high-powered engines say, oh, rook to c8 is better. Yeah, maybe. I mean, if we say, oh, the computer proves it, we're deluding ourselves because we don't know that the computer plays the best move. And some of the evidence for that was when the strongest computer in the world, Stockfish, lost to AlphaZero. Queen c2, and it should be dead equal here. Well, so white's a little bit worse off than at the very beginning of the game, where he's supposed to be at about 0.145. Okay, black comes up, aims here. A white square, but this knight can't really attack this anytime soon. If he could, then queen takes g2 might be threatened, but even then, white can just move this pawn up, block off any diagonal like this, and have his queen guarding this. And it would take this knight 4 moves to get to here, and that's if white didn't do anything to prevent it. All right, so now white attacks the queen again, but he blocks off his own queen and makes his own knight not able to move here. And black is hoping that white will pull black's rook into his half of the board. But, of course, he declines to do that. And now black hopes that white will undouble his pawns for him. But white doesn't want to do that, but he gave away the pawn now. Is it safe to take it? Actually, white can win this pawn back if he does. He does take it. And again, I know almost all of you watching this video would have moved their bishop to e3, attacking the queen, or over here, attacking the rook, or at least planned to get a rook here to attack it again and get to the 7th rank. But instead, white goes here, which after he makes the move, yeah, that looks okay. If he takes this, queen takes, the knight is still guarded from this queen. Okay. The rook comes down, and that still seems not to be any serious threat. So the queen is guarding the bishop as well as the rook. But if the queen gets to g5, threatening mate, this will become dangerous for black. Knights get dangerous when a queen is with them attacking. Okay, black is double attacking f2, but white triple defends it. He could even move his bishop here and attack the queen. But instead he goes here, and I suspect that this is because at some point he wants to put his knight here. So the rook through X-ray vision is aimed at the back row. Now, if the knight moves, these rooks can see each other. And now the queen comes down here, threatening to take the rook. The rook must stay on the back row because this bishop has to be double guarded. But now that the rook is unguarded, this is pinned. And this looks like a free knight. Now the bishop is pinned, so on bishop takes, he can go rook takes rook and then move his queen. So he takes with the rook and allows the rook to take the bishop. Wow, what is he planning? He moves his king here. And so now he's got a knight against the rook. And white is also down a pawn, but it's a doubled isolated pawn. So, having the rook against the knight, sometimes the knight is better when you have the queen and knight close to the king, because the knight can be a dangerous attacker. Queen c7, black naturally wants to just have an endgame because he's got better material, better static chances. Blocks the queen off from the other queen. The rook is also guarded from the knight. Okay, this is a threat to win the knight because if the queen takes back, then black takes white's other rook. And now the rook is not pinned. If white moves the rook, the queen is guarded. So now black comes back over here, guarding f7. And it looks like white wants to come creeping closer and closer. He may go here soon. Okay, that game reminds me of a game in the 1951 tournament book that involved one of the players of this game. Dr. Max Euwe was the black pieces in that game, and Geller was the white pieces. And I might feature that game on this channel at some point because we have lots of exciting sacrificial attacks. But that game was really Max Euwe's triumph of defense. He seemed to be defending against a fierce attack until the last minute, and then his attacker was suddenly resigning, as the counterattack had been planned for a long time, and it involved this f6 move. Okay, so next move, the king comes up another square, and white is gradually creeping toward the black king. Okay, so white says gradually. Okay, do what you're gonna do. Well, the queen can't go here anymore. He might want to go there because it would have threatened checkmate before, but now the black queen guards this, and this pawn guards this square. And so he just escapes with the queen. His queen and rook guarding each other. And now white has a very strong threat. I hope you see what white should or would do if it were white's move. Yeah, rook here might be pretty strong. So then this happens, check, king takes back, and black must stop that rook to d7 move now. Goes over here. Now, if there was a pin along the g file, this check would be good, but there's not. So white's actually attacking with his king here. I mean, it's funny. It's like the king looks like a queen here, but it's not. So now black gets the knight and the pawn for his rook and completely destroys any attacking chances. But guess what? Any attacking chances for white, because black is going to be doing all the attacking now. Not just because he has 2 extra pawns, but because that white king is so exposed. Check again. And now it's at minus 3.73. This is where in a game between 2 kids, I might just say, okay, well, you know, unless this turned around and white won, we have nothing else to see here. Goes back, and he's chasing, and now we got another piece involved. Check, and because the king is out there again and again and again, black will get to make a double move. What I mean by that is when you put the king in check, he must get out of check, and then it's your turn again. So unless he gets out of check by making a move he would want to make anyway, you have full initiative. So black takes the pawn, threatening to get the rook. And white now realizes that this has now become hopeless for him. If the king wanders to the C or E file, a rook check will put him right back on the E file. And then queen takes rook is coming. So this is where white resigns. Dr. Max Euwe resigned in this position. So quick look through the game one more time off the score sheet. Started as a closed opening, and Alekhine did not need this win to win the match, because he ultimately won the match 15.5 to 9.5. So 15 to 10 would have been good enough to win anyway. Castles and this knight GE2, which Max Euwe had this played against him by Geller in the game I was talking about. D5, A3, bishop E7, takes. This is the final game of the match, so although one could say that several moves before this, or several games before this, it was already hopeless for Max Euwe. So many people say his name wrong. It looks like it's Euwe or Uwe or something like that, but it's a Dutch name, and it is Euwe, which rhymes with fervor. Dr. Max Euwe. Attacks the bishop. He attacks the knight. They do the trade, and it seems to get unnecessarily complicated here for a little while, especially with this move. How many people would make that move and just allow this? And then even after this happens, black doesn't even take the rook. And he leaves it one more time. Now black finally does take it. No, he doesn't, not yet. After this, then finally he takes it. So when we get to this position, black has about a third to a half pawn advantage. If I were not looking at an engine here, though, if I didn't know it, I mean, it looks about equal to any of us mortals. Hits the queen, starts centralizing and attacking stuff. Black wants a trade. He says no, he wants a trade. White doesn't. So finally he takes the pawn. Now white could go bishop e3 and just win this pawn back, but he thinks a little more globally. He goes here, putting pressure on g7. Queen moves might create, at least temporarily, a mate threat. Rook down, attacking that, so white guards it for the second time. But notice white is kind of getting his pieces closer to the black king, and ultimately black pays a small price to avoid it. He gives up a rook for a knight and a pawn. And this is a little bit weird. That's the trade, has to get out of check. And now black once again tries for a trade. White says, no, give me your queen for a rook. Attacking the knight, threatening to win a piece. So he covers the queen. Why does rook takes knight still not work? Let's see. What would happen if black took the knight? Oh, threatening a mate. And if black takes the queen, he gets checkmated. If he takes the rook with the pawn, then queen takes queen. This is an unguarded piece, and this is, the queen was also unguarded, and this is a discovery. So that's why taking the knight doesn't work. So he actually goes here, and the rest of this is just becoming an endgame. And there it is. He gives up the rook for a knight and a pawn because it leaves white with no remaining attack and an extremely exposed king. Here, when I looked at this the first time, queen e5 check seemed like a good move here, but truth be told, anything that black does that keeps this king dancing around and gets the rook involved will be good enough. Check. It seemed that he did not want to go to a file where the rook could check him, but now black has two pieces involved. And he got that last pawn. So now in the end we can expect these pawns to win. And so that's all for this game. So I hope you enjoyed that and learned from it. And I hope you look up my other earlier World Championship epic matches on this same YouTube channel. And check my website, chrischess.com, for information on stuff like this and lessons. Right now I'm going to be doing absolutely free lessons for total newbies. This is people who do not know how to play chess, on chess notation and the movements of the pieces and the absolute basics, on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this is in November of 2020. So thanks for watching. Please do share, subscribe, and tell your friends about it. Thanks for watching.